In this lecture, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into Parse and learn how we can work with different pieces there. And let's go ahead by starting back inside of our Android Studio project. We need to clear out a little bit of code. So all the code from this Parse object where we make the example object down to where we're logging out information, we're going to delete all of that because that was just a simple test to see if we could get things up and running. And with that, let's go ahead and move over to our main activity where we're going to be writing some code, and hopefully you get a good grasp on how you can add things to the Parse server, pull things back down, edit them if you need to. We're going to cover all of that. So the first thing that we want to talk about is how do we make a new object and have it stored inside of Parse? Well, first you have to create a class. So a class, if we go back to the browser here, so you can see there's a couple of classes here. There's role, user, those are ones created by default by Parse, but then we made the example object, and we're going to make a new one here. In this example scenario, let's say we're creating a video game and we want someone to be able to save their scores. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a new class called score, and just remember, a class is kind of like in SQL. Whenever we create a table, if we go back to the browser here, for example, example object, if we think of this as a table, these are then individual rows inside of a table, and so they can have different properties like my string, my number, whatever. Our score objects is going to have like a score with it, maybe a username, and so let's go ahead and walk through that. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to create a new Parse object. And you can decide what you want to name that. In this case, I'm going to call it score because we're trying to represent a score. So we're going to say new capital Parse object. And then inside of the parentheses, you need to pass in a string of the name of the class. Now, all classes in Parse need to be uppercase, so make sure you do that. Next, we're going to take this score object and we're going to add some properties onto it. So we're going to say score.put. And this is where you can add in some information. So the first thing is you have to provide the field name that you're going to be putting there. So in this case, let's say we want to add a username. We would add that first, then comma, we would specify what the specific username is. So I might say Nick here. Then with the score, we have to say what the actual score is. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to say put, and we're going to say score for the name, and then we need to add an actual score there. So let's do something like 45. That was my score in this hypothetical video game. Now, once you have this in place, we need to actually take this score object and save it to Parse. And Parse has made this super simple. All we have to do is we just have to take our score object and say score dot and then save. And there's all these different options. There's straight up save, save eventually, save in background. And for both eventually and background, you have these callbacks, which are will tell you about when it happens. So you don't want to do the save one because that will sort of pause your app until the save happens. I recommend the save in background, and particularly the one that has a callback, because then you can know whether or not things were successful. So let's do save in background, and we're going to say we're going to create a new, and we want to create a new save callback. And if you just hit enter, it's going to autocomplete for you there. And then the code inside of here, it'll provide this parse exception E if there was some sort of issue. So we can say, first check and see if there's anything to this exception that they give us. So we're going to say if E is equal to null, which if that was the situation, that means everything is okay. Else, that would be, something's gone wrong here and we need to know about it. And so we could just take this E and do a print stack trace with that. Now, if it is okay, we want somehow to, let ourselves know that it all worked out. So let's go ahead and just do a log on this. So we're going to say log I, and we're going to say success. And maybe we'll just mention here that we saved the score. Okay. So there you have it. This is kind of the basics of all it takes to make a new object in Parse. We have to say the class that we want to make. We have to put in some properties there, and then we have to save it. Okay, so let's go ahead and hit run here on the emulator. And with that, let's go ahead and get that popped up. And we should see over here that we're going to have a new class called score pop up with one item inside of there. Okay, so this opened up. If we go to logcat, look at that, we saved the score. And if we go back to the browser and refresh the page here, look at that, we have a new score class. And if we click on that, here's that one score that we created with a score of 45 and the name Nick. Now, if we go back to Android Studio, let's go ahead and create a new score for someone named Sean. Sean beat me on a score. He has a score of like 65, let's say. And we'll go ahead and run this because I just want you to see how you can add multiple. The more objects that you add, the more it's going to stack up here. So let me reload this page now, and look at that. There's now 2 people inside of this score class. And again, think of this, I think it's best to think of it as, the SQL table, right? Like this is, the name of the table is score, and then these are rows inside of the table. And so, these are individual instances of particular scores. All right. So now that you've got a good grasp on that, let's go ahead and move forward and talk about how we can grab things from Parse. So we're going to come back to our code, and let's go ahead and just comment out what we've done so far. And then below, we're going to talk about how we can get things from Parse server. So in this situation, we need to make a query. So we're going to say parse, and we want query. Guess I better just type that out now, better than scrolling through the whole thing there. So this is going to be a parse query where we're looking to get a parse object back. So we'll put that inside of the angled brackets. And let's just go ahead and call this a query. And this is going to be equal to a capital parse query dot, and this is where we want to say get query for, and you have to pass in a class name here. So if we want to get the score objects, we would pass in capital score. Then with that, now that we have this query object, we can say query dot get in, and there's all these options for get in background or get first in background. We want to do the get in background, so let's go ahead and do that. With this, we have to first specify the ID of the object that we want to get. And you're saying, well, what's an object ID? Well, just like we had a primary key with the SQL database, if we go back to the browser here, every item inside of Parse has an object ID that uniquely identifies it. So any new row that's added here, it's going to have a new object ID, like the example object. Any of these things are going to have an object ID. So for example, if we want to grab the score for Nick with the score of 45, we want to copy this object ID, come back to our code, and put that inside of quotes, and that is going to go get us the particular object that we're looking for. Now, once we do that, we want to go get a callback whenever we are able to successfully get this object. So we are going to say new get callback for a particular parse object, just like that. And let's make sure that we put a semicolon at the end of that. And you'll see this method that we have here gives us a parse object, the one that we were hoping for, unless something didn't work out. In that case, we'd want to look to this exception for some help, but this is where we can move forward. So let's do an if statement to make sure we actually got an object back. So the check that we'll do is we're going to say, if E is equal to null, and not 2 percentage size, we need the ampersand. So if E is equal to null, that means there was no error, and as long as object is not equal to null, this will assure us that we actually have an object that we can move forward with. So if this is the case on this particular object, you can get to its particular properties by saying .get, and you just have to provide a string. Like, for example, if we wanted to get to up here, we had said username and score, we could type in username here, and that would give us back the particular object that we're looking for. Now, this just general .get usually isn't the best. You want to do something like get string if you're looking for a string. So for the username, that would be a good one. But if we're working with, for example, the score, we'd want to go get an int. But this is a good starting point. So let's go ahead and log out this information. So we're going to say log I, and we'll say maybe just username comma, and then let's go ahead and cut and paste that in there. So now it's going to log out the username, and let's also log out the score. We're going to have to change this a bit, but we're going to say score should be, instead of get string, we want to do get int, but we still have to provide the term score right inside of there, and then we've got to turn this into a string. So we'll do a .toString with this. Go ahead and wrap that around. Okay. Oops, and we've got to go get that object. There we go. All right. So this code should have us log out the username and score for Nick, because we put in that particular object ID. If we change the object ID, we should, see Sean, for example, if we had put in his. But let's go ahead and check this out. And if we come down, boom, look, there's Nick for 45. So just for kicks, let's go grab the other object ID, paste that in there and run. So we should now see the information for Sean. So let's go ahead and run this. And come on, we believe in you. Look at that, Sean with a score of 65. Pretty cool. Now you may be wondering, how can I update an object once I already have it? So let's say we want to update Sean's score. He put even more of a beat down on me, and he got a higher score than he had before. Well, what we can do is, for example, here we can take this particular object that we got back, and we can just update some of its information. So we could say, dot put, and let's change the score to be something like 85 now. Like, he had a huge jump up. So we'll go ahead and take that object. We're going to put that new information. Now, in order for that to be official, we want to do our object.save in background. In this case, I'm not really concerned about the callback. I just want to see if this works. So let's go ahead and run this. So there should be 2 points here. One is that when we log this, we should see the score updated to 85. And that's not because the save happens super fast and we're able to get the right information. But this object here is now locally here inside of this function. And so it's not like it's going and getting it from the internet and bringing it back. But when we go and log it out, like, it will just show what we changed it to. The real test will be when we look on the browser to see if it's there. So let's open up Logcat. Unexpectedly, it said Sean 85, but the real test is Sean is currently 65. We should see that updated to 85. Boom. Okay. At a good place. So the next thing for us is I have a challenge for you. I want you to do a little bit of work here with working with some tweets. So I'm going to comment out this code. I'm just going to update where that goes. And my new challenge for you is I want you to first create a tweet class. Okay. Then I want you to make with that class, they should have a username and they should be able to tweet with that. I want you to save it to Parse. After you've done that, query it. And lastly, I want you to update the tweet. Okay, so basically make a tweet class, make sure it has a username and a tweet, save it to Parse, and then query it and update it. Basically what we just did before with the score stuff, but now do it on your own, and hopefully doing this exercise on your own is going to make it that much more stuck in your brain. All right, so hopefully that went well. Step number 1 for us is we want to make a new parse object. So we'll type that out, and I'm going to call this tweet, and this is going to be equal to capital parse object, a new parse object, and we'll pass in a new class name that we are going to call capital tweet. Then with this tweet, we are going to put some information in there. So we're going to say put, I'm going to say this person has a username. I'll put my Twitter handle, Nick Chuck Walter. I know it's a really long one. And then with this, I'm also going to put a particular tweet. So this is going to have the name of tweet, and we'll give it the value of I like cheese. Yeah, let the world know. So with this in place, we've got to save this tweet. So I'm going to do .save in background. And I would like a callback about this. So I'm going to do new save callback. let's check and see if there was an error. So I'm going to set up an if statement. And I'm going to say if e is equal to null, that means everything's good. So I'm going to go ahead and log out that okay. And we'll say save success. But if there was an issue, we'll go ahead and just say whatever that error is, let's do a print stack trace. We need to know about it. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this, see what we get from our emulator here. Hopefully good news. And then when we come back to Safari here and reload, we should see that pop up. So look at that. We have save success. Let's reload this page. Look at that. We have a tweet. I like cheese by username Nick Chuck Walter. So we have completed the part of creating a tweet class. Username and tweet have been added to it. We've saved it. Next, we need to do a query with it. So let's go ahead. We can basically just copy and paste the code that we had here before and just change out some information. So I'll go ahead and paste this from before. I want to go get the particular tweet. So I'm going to copy its object ID and update that. This is good. This is doing the proper check. Now with this, we don't want to do the update stuff just yet. So I'm going to go ahead and comment that out. We still want to get the username, but rather than getting the score, we want to get the tweet, which is a string. So I'm going to copy this line of code and paste it below and just change this to be tweet, and also change this to be tweet. So if we go and run this, it should be able to log out the tweet that we have saved, the one that said I like cheese, and also said, say who it was that posted it. So here comes the app. And look at that, save success, and I'm not seeing that information, so I'm not completely sure. Oh, this is the problem. When you copy and paste, you got to be really careful. So this is looking for the score class. I need this to be the tweet class. So let's go ahead and run this one more time, and we should hopefully now see the correct information. So here it comes, and boom, look at that, Nick Chuck Walter, I like cheese. So we know that that's okay. And I guess every time that we've been running, we've been making more and more tweets. So that's kind of funny, and they all say I like cheese, so yeah, whatever. Last step for us, we need to update the tweet. So we had code here to update the object. This one is updating the score. So rather than score, we want to update the tweet to say something like, cheese is okay. Maybe I posted that now because I'm suddenly lactose intolerant or something like that. So go ahead and hit run here. We'll check to see if we get the new tweet message here, and we should see the tweet updated. So look at that, cheese is okay. Now I want you to see this, the ID of X, capital ETF, and we'll come back. So if I reload XETF should show cheese is okay. And look at that, XETF now says cheese is okay. So hopefully you got a good grasp on this. I think you're ready to move forward and start making this Instagram app.